want to speak, we put our name in the chat?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So I will ask all members, except for the mayor, to please turn their video off, turn their microphone off until they're called to the floor, and I will turn the meeting over to Mayor Brown to lead us in this electronic meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. Peter Fay, our city clerk, for his due diligence in preparing the first electronic meeting that we're having as a Brampton City Council. So good morning. Welcome everyone to this special meeting of council. This meeting is called for the following purposes: to consider and enact amendments to the procedure bylaw to allow members to participate in meetings electronically during conditions of an emergency as legislatively defined; to consider other statutory required and or time-sensitive matters related to the city's response to the ongoing COVID-19 emergency, including but not limited to A, Brampton transit matters, and B, property tax matters. Under council's meeting rules, no other business can be considered at this special meeting. As this is the first meeting of Brampton City Council, conducted with electronic participation by members of council. We will start this meeting with the city clerk calling the roll for attendance at today's meeting. He can also, I know Councillor Councillor Dillon just joined. I think the clerk will give you some instructions of how to turn your video off.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. So all members of council, I will be calling the roll. I will call your name and I will ask you to turn on your mic and indicate that you're present in this electronic meeting. Councillor Dillon, first of all, can I ask you to please turn off your video? All members of council except the mayor are to be on audio only.
Can you hear us, Gurpreet? No, your mic is muted, Gurpreet, so you need to turn your mic on and mute your video.
So at the bottom of your screen, Councillor Dillon, there should be a camera icon in a blue circle. Just hit that and it should have a line through it which will turn off your video.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Dillon.
Members of council, I will call the roll in ward order, starting with wards 1 and 5. Councillor Santos. Present?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Vicente.
Councillor Vicente is present.
Councillor Willens.
Present.
Councillor Paleshi.
Present.
Councillor Bowman.
Present.
Councillor Medeiros.
Present.
Councillor Williams is present. Councillor Fortini is present in the chambers. Councillor Singh.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Dillon.
Present. Just trying to figure out how to turn this video off.
Thank you. And Mayor Brown.
Okay, yes, present. Okay, so thank you for the roll call to the clerk. All members of council are present today. We have a motion moved by Councillor Willen, seconded by Councillor Paleshi to approve the agenda. I'll have the clerk take a recorded vote for this motion.
Thank you. Members, please indicate yes or no. Approval of the agenda. Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Councillor Vicente.
Yes.
Councillor Willens.
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi.
Yes.
Councillor Bowman.
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros.
Yes.
Councillor Williams. Present? Yes? Yes. Councillor Fortini. Yes. Thank you. Councillor Fortini is yes. Councillor Williams is yes. Councillor Singh.
Yes.
Councillor Dillon.
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries unanimously 11-0.
Thank you. Do any members have a declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for any matter to be considered on today's agenda? I'm looking at the speakers list on my screen. I do not see anyone who's asked to mention a conflict, so the clerk will so note for the meeting minutes. As these are extraordinary circumstances, the province of Ontario has provided municipalities with the tools to conduct its meetings electronically to support physical distancing and isolation while ensuring the business of the municipality can continue. Meetings of municipal councils are to be open to the public for transparency and accountability, and our meeting will continue to be as well, with a few precautions and limitations. In-person attendance at this meeting is limited only to members of council and essential city staff to support this meeting. The public can still access and participate in the meeting by a few measures. One, watching this meeting remotely through the city's live stream and playback of the archive video stream. Submitting questions about the agenda business and decisions made by council today, emailing the city clerk's office at cityclerksoffice@brampton.ca with your question, which may be read into the public meeting record during the 15-minute public question period before the end of the meeting. I'll repeat that email address at cityclerksoffice@brampton.ca. Also, continue to follow important service and public health updates through the city's website at brampton.ca, which will include updated information on the city's response as well as links to other important sources of information, including the Region of Peel Public Health, the Province of Ontario, and the Government of Canada. A few reminders for members of council regarding our electronic meeting. If you have motions or amending motions to introduce regarding business on today's agenda, please email your motion to Charlotte, our Deputy City Clerk, at charlotte.gravlev@brampton.ca. Gravlev is spelled Gravlev. A final reminder before the start is to consider on today's agenda business. Please ensure your microphone is muted. So to repeat, please ensure your microphone is muted until you're assigned to the floor by myself or called by the clerk for a vote. This will help ensure only one person is speaking at one time and minimize the other background noise disruptions during the meeting. It's hard enough during a council meeting to have only one person speaking, and it would make it even harder if we all had our mics on at the same time. I would also note that I appreciate the members of council have been so patient, understanding during this difficult time. I'm sure everyone wanted to come into City Hall, but it's about protecting the health of our city staff that have to be there to run this meeting. And I would note we're having a meeting at the region tomorrow as well, and the regional chair and the clerk have asked me to members of regional council, please do not come in. Please take this call electronically. It'll be in the same format on Skype. Social distancing is key right now as we fight this COVID-19. So before we go to 3.1, which is our staff report on Bill 187, Municipal Emergency Act 2020, the CAO asked if he could say a word. And so is David Barrick there with the clerk?
Yes, I'm here, Mayor.
Well, before you say a word, I know we've had an incident with our transit operator that you wanted to reference, and the difficult period that our city staff are going through and how grateful we are for them. But I just note that David is here at work early and will be staying late as he is each day, and today happens to be his birthday. So I'm sure you would have preferred to spend your birthday not fighting a pandemic, but David, thank you for your work, and if you want to say a few words, now would be the appropriate time.
Great, thanks for that, Mr. Mayor, and the kind words. Special thanks as well to the clerk and IT team for facilitating the logistics of today's meeting. I know that wasn't easy to turn around for today, so thanks for that. Good morning, Mayor Brown, councillors, and member of the public watching online. I'll provide my comments from where I'm seated to limit folks coming up to the podium. Thank you for joining us today in this unconventional manner. While the city has been monitoring and preparing its response to COVID-19 for months, the past couple of weeks has escalated rapidly, with the situation changing daily, if not hourly. In this light, the city has taken unprecedented measures to ensure the safety of our employees and the public. I would like to thank our dedicated staff from across the city who mobilized seamlessly to ensure quick, comprehensive, and coordinated emergency response through the city's council-approved emergency plan. Staff from emergency management, IT, HR, strategic communications, transit, and many other departments have been working diligently and tirelessly as part of our incident management team to enact an effective integrated response. In particular, I'd like to thank our Brampton Emergency Management Office, including Bill and Alain, for their ongoing leadership. They have been unwavering in their resolve to serve our community with compassion above all else. Finally, to the employees working on the front lines, thank you for continuing to show up and keep our city moving. This includes Brampton Transit employees who continue driving, disinfecting, and keeping our buses on the roads. Brampton Fire Service responding to calls and keeping our community safe. Snowplow drivers keeping our streets clear of snow, and bylaw enforcement keeping them clear for emergency vehicles. Further continuing work on all fronts, including animal services, POA management, still at the courthouse every day receiving documents, parks maintenance, parks keepers, four-persons inspectors, arborists, horticultural staff, landscape construction, construction inspectors, surveyors, road operations, fleet mechanics, traffic outside services, sign makers, etc. To contextualize where we are today, Mr. Mayor, I would like to highlight key developments from the past 2 weeks. On March 12, 2020, Brampton Emergency Management Office, or BMO, activated the Municipal Emergency Response Plan at a Level 2 general emergency. On Friday, March 13, 2020, following Peel Public Health's announcement on additional COVID-19 precautions, the City of Brampton made significant changes to its services, closing all non-essential public facilities and canceling all events and programming. On Tuesday, March 17th, the province declared a state of emergency, which the city was in full support of. This decisive measure ordered the closure of facilities providing indoor recreational programs, libraries, and schools defined in the Education Act, all licensed child care centers, and all in-person food establishments. This also mandated that public events over 50 people are prohibited, including parades, events, and services in places of worship until March 31st. On this same date, the city changed its emergency status to a Level 1 major emergency. Following recommendations from our emergency management team yesterday, Mayor Brown declared a state of emergency in the City of Brampton. Yesterday, we also shared the sad news that a City of Brampton employee from Brampton Transit has tested positive for COVID-19. In terms of ongoing efforts, we have been working closely with partnering agencies and levels of government to ensure consistency in emergency response and communications. Additionally, recognizing the various groups impacted by COVID-19, four mayor's task forces were launched to support our city's vulnerable communities and local economy. Today's meeting provides the opportunity to ratify recent decisions that have emerged from the changing nature of the COVID-19 situation, namely 2 decisions made by staff with legislative authority and in compliance with the city's emergency management plan and in consultation with the mayor as required. First, in regards to Brampton Transit, it was determined on March 20th that Brampton Transit would introduce free fares, rear boarding, half-capacity buses, and more, effective March 21st and March 23rd. Second, it was determined on March 21st in this unprecedented situation and with tax payments coming due to give residents ability to defer taxes and waive all penalties for up to 5 months. The goal of today's outcomes are to further enable our team to be more nimble in our response and help reduce the impacts of COVID-19 on our community. As we navigate the coming months, city staff will take necessary measures to help keep our community safe. I would like to conclude by once again thanking Council, our employees, and our community for their continued support as we work through this together. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, David. So our first staff report is item 3.1, which is Bill 187, Municipal Emergency Act 2020, Emergency Electronic Meetings and COVID-19 Emergency. This item will enable City Council to convene electronic meetings during a declared emergency like we currently have in place through the recent provincial declaration of an emergency and more recently the City of Brampton declaration of emergency issued on March 24th. Do any members have any questions or comments regarding the staff report? If so, please use the instant messaging section of Skype to add your name to the speakers list. I see the first question. I've got Councillor Medeiros and then Councillor Vicente.
Thank you, through your mayor. I'm not sure if it's the clerk, but in terms of right now to our special council meeting, do the same rules apply about calling a meeting? Meaning that what is the protocol? Is it only at the call of the mayor during this emergency period, or can councillors petition to call a meeting at their will?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the Municipal Act does allow a special meeting to be called by the head of council, by the mayor, or by a majority of the members of council through a petition. That is in our procedure bylaw as well. And the requirement in our procedure bylaw is a minimum 24 hours notice. As well, our procedure bylaw, sorry, I just wish to confirm as well, the procedure bylaw does say that in an emergency situation, the mayor may call a meeting at any time. So those are still provisions that are in effect.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Marta, just to clarify, the Minister of Municipal Affairs said if there was an urgent need and we needed to call a meeting less than 24 hours, that during this provincial emergency that we have the ability to do so, that if there was an urgent issue, I needed to call a meeting in 6 hours, that we could. So the traditional rules for notice period are not the same. Any additional questions, Councillor Medeiros?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Vicente?
Thank you, Mayor. A question with regards to normal course of business. We're in an emergency situation, and this meeting format seems to be working well. I think it's going quite smoothly, and a shout out to the clerk's office for doing such a superb job of organizing this. Will we then resume our committees of council, regular council meetings as we have in the schedule from before?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the provisions that are in this report 3.1 speak only to regular or special meetings of council at this time. There's nothing preventing, and it may be early at this point, given some of the other provincial orders and restrictions that are in place, but it is not, if this carries today, it is something that council could consider down the road through an electronic meeting to then start to broaden the return to normalcy with allowing other committees to meet under these provisions should council decide that's the appropriate thing to do. So that's a decision that can be made at a future date.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, then, so is it our plan to resume weekly council and committee meetings?
So I would want to get the input from Alan Normand and Chief Boyes, but as soon as they feel it's appropriate for us to sort of return to normal activity, then I would want to do so as quickly as possible, because obviously it affects the economy of the city. But if Alan Normand and the Chief believe that there are safety issues with city staff having to be at City Hall to prepare reports or be there to conduct a committee meeting, I would defer to their advice on whether it's safe for city employees. But if it is safe for city employees, then I would like to continue to function as much as possible as a city.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions on this matter, we'll then let's go to the next part here. I have a motion moved by Councillor Singh and seconded by Councillor Santos to approve the report recommendations. The clerk is going to display it on the screen. Would members of council like me to read this, or can we vote on it as read?
As read.
Okay. As read. So there's portions 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'll ask the clerk to take a recorded vote.
Councillor Santos, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor thank you. Councillor Vicente.
Yes.
Councillor Willens.
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi.
Yes.
Councillor Bowman.
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros.
Yes.
Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams votes yes. Councillor Fortini. Councillor Fortini votes yes. Councillor Singh.
Yes.
Councillor Dillon.
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, that motion carries unanimously 11-0.
Thank you. Our next item is item 3.2, which is staff report for changes to Brampton Transit Service and fares in response to COVID-19. And before we take questions on this, I just wanted to say this is one of the scenarios where speed trumps perfection. We were told by the transit union and our commissioner there was a real concern about the entry when it came to people paying fares, that rare boarding, like they had changed in Mississauga, was the safest route. And so we acted pretty quickly on this, knowing that we'd want to have council ratify it afterwards. But one of the larger concerns here is that our transit operators are heroes right now. They're going out there, they're continuing to work, and they're doing so to protect this, to make sure we have a critical service available. People taking transit are going to work in companies that are essential services, going to the hospital. And unfortunately, we had one of our transit operators test positive for COVID-19. And so if anything, it pains me that we did not act faster, even though we acted pretty quick. For me, this was one of the final straws of why we needed to make it a declaration of emergency. So this is to ratify the recommendations that were made by the union and our commissioner, Alex. I would now take questions from councillors. First up is Councillor Paleschi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my first question is, all buses that are currently running in Brampton, do they have the shields to shield the driver? Or do we have buses that are out there without the shields?
Is our transit commissioner, Alex, available to answer that?
Yes, through you, Mayor. We are definitely equipped, all our vehicles are equipped with the operator shields, and part of our directive was quite some time ago is that all operators are to have it fully extended to reduce any exposure. Unlike many other properties within the Greater Toronto Hamilton area, with the exception of TTC, where we're the only other property that has that, and that has definitely helped out in this situation as well.
Sorry, I think I was having a little bit of technical difficulties. Can I get a yes or no if all the buses that are currently out there have shields to shield the driver?
Yes, and through you, Mayor, to Councillor Paleschi, that is affirmative, yes.
Thank you very much. Currently, our buses, they're supporting the social distancing by taping off or doing something on the for seats. Can somebody explain that a little bit more to me, and kind of the 50% capacity rule and the authority of the driver to enforce that rule?
Absolutely, through you, Mayor. What we've done effective Monday of this week, we've limited 50% seating capacity in our vehicles. We've temporarily taped up with an indicator each adjacent seat to try to promote the social distancing, as we understand is one of the needed items to combat COVID-19. What we are doing is we're instructing our drivers that if they reach a capacity of over 50% because people are crush loading through the rear doors, that they are to contact control and not move the vehicle. So we're trying to enforce, however, the driver themselves are limited in terms of the ability to enforce that, but what they have been doing is being instructed not to move the vehicle. We have had a couple of situations where that hasn't happened, and we've addressed that fairly quickly. Again, this is day 3 within that new deployment with the 50% seating loads.
Okay, thanks, Alex. I guess if there are issues that are out there on specific sites, I was wondering if we could ensure that we look at the potential of having a security guard present on maybe some of the buses that may be of ongoing concern for this, and this is ultimately the safety for all the passengers and our driver. So is that something that we can put into play potentially through you, Mr. Mayor?
I'll have Alex answer that first.
Through you, Mayor. What we have been doing is having supervisory staff at terminals to try to help facilitate with the 50% capacity. And also, we do have security staff at our terminals, but we are working with our security to see what more enhancements we can do. It may be challenging right now because of limited resources of having security deployed around the city at varying locations. You can well imagine we do have areas in mid-route where we have stops that our abundance of people are waiting. We are still picking up to fill the 50%, but then leaving people behind, given the ability of rapidly responding with deployments of vehicles and spareboard operators within a city to try to pick up the areas that we're feeling we're getting loads in excess of 50%.
So I'll take that as Alex is going to look into where logistically it makes sense. Okay, Councillor Pleshy?
That's great. My last question to transit is, and actually anybody who can answer this, if the government, either federal or provincially, mandated a lockdown, does that mean that transit completely shuts down, or are they still operational for those essential services that I guess that list would probably be shortened a little bit in a lockdown to ensure that employees of, say, grocery stores, hospitals can still get to those locations, or is it a complete shutdown of transit?
So through the mayor, clearly if the province gives direction to shut down public transit, then we'd comply with it accordingly. Right now the province, through its recent changes, still have transportation as a requirement. So right now the province is expecting us to continue operating with whatever capacity we continue operating on. So I'm hopeful that answers your question, Councillor. But certainly, there are many people that still rely on our system, and very proud of our operators who are showing up to work and our maintenance folks to keep our system running at this point under these conditions. So the question,
and for sure, Alex, we do, and we support our drivers too, that are kind of those front lines, and we appreciate everything that they're doing. I guess the answer to the question is really, we wouldn't know if there was a lockdown. We would wait for either the province or the federal government to give us details of a lockdown.
and through the mayor, to be more direct, we would take direction from the federal or provincial government if that was a direction given. And if it included shutting down transit, then we'd be doing that as well.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, we have this motion that's been moved. Let's pull it up. This has been moved by Councillor Santos, seconded by Councillor Williams, to approve the report recommendations. Can everyone see it on the screen? So there's three parts, 1, 2, and 3. So we want to approve the motion as read. Can I have the clerk take a recorded vote?
A recorded vote's been requested on the motion. Please note in clause 3 of this motion as published online, and we're trying to rectify the issue that members may not be able to see the entire motion on their Skype session. Part 3 does say that the emergency action taken by Brampton Transit in response to COVID-19 pandemic to discontinue fare collection until no later than 5 days after the declaration of emergency made by, and instead of the province, it's being substituted with the Brampton's head of council under Section 4 of the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. That change is being proposed because this report was prepared before the mayor's declaration of emergency, and it is appropriate that the termination of the declaration of emergency to invoke the more normal procedures under transit should come from the mayor as opposed to the province in this situation. All members of council, I will ask for your vote now. Councillor Santos?
Yes.
Councillor Vicente?
Yes.
Councillor Willens?
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi?
Yes.
Councillor Bowman?
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros?
Yes.
Councillor Williams? Councillor Williams votes yes. Councillor Fortini? Yes. Councillor Fortini votes yes. Councillor Singh?
Yes.
Councillor Dillon?
Yes.
Mayor Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, that carries unanimously 11-0.
Thank you. This now takes us to item 3.3, which is the staff report on property tax assistance, the city response to COVID-19. Obviously, this is not just a health crisis, it's an economic crisis. And people are really struggling out there. So this is what we've seen happen in different cities. And I think this is a reasonable response to people that frankly are going to face some pretty difficult financial times. So I think the staff report speaks for itself, but we'll now take questions from councillors. So first up is Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm not sure if it was if you or staff could speak to the 5-month. What I've seen around GTA municipalities, everyone seems to have been going with 3. With I guess when we see what the feedback is on and how this proceeds, understanding that this can go longer. But if you can just help understanding the rationale around the 5, and then after, again, the 5, I guess, is not a hard number based on what happens, and God forbid that this goes further than 5 months, then we'll revisit this again.
Mm-hmm. So I'm happy to answer that, and if the clerk wants to add anything, of course, Peter, you're welcome to. When we made this decision, people were literally complaining to the city that they didn't want to pay their property taxes. The March 18th deadline had just happened or was about to happen, and so there was a critical moment of time. I've been reading a lot about influenzas over the last week, and Andre Picard, who is a public policy expert on health, wrote a piece a few days ago that said the best recipe to deal with a pandemic is transparency and honesty. Mark Berry, who wrote The Great Influenza about the 1918 one, he was on American television just last week talking about the cities that 1918 pandemic were the ones that were honest with the public. I wish I could say that this is only going to be a few weeks and things will be back to normal in 3 months. I think we're being honest with people by saying this is not going to be a matter of weeks, it's going to be a matter of months. I get briefed every day by public health. I'm on a call every week with the Deputy Prime Minister, and I'm not interested in at any point misleading the public that this is going to be business back to normal in 2 to 3 weeks and they'll be on their feet again in 3 months. I think Brampton has taken a more cautious approach by giving people the window of 5 months, and frankly, you may not want to hear this, Councillor Medeiros or my fellow members of council, but I'm not sure people are going to be on their feet 5 months from now. We likely will have to revisit this, but I think the position we've taken now gives us some time to see how this unfolds.
Now, I guess, and through you, Mayor, with this type of announcement, in terms of businesses who are approaching us, or even residents who are approaching us regarding the process, is it simply that they just do not report to us that they're going to defer the taxes? So if we don't receive anything, we just assume? How does that process, or is there going to be maybe an email that goes out to us to give us sort of some background? I will say I've expressed my concern, as you know, and I understand that there's a timely nature to this. But when you have residents asking you in terms of the rollout, and I think I can only speak for myself, is that I didn't feel myself prepared seeing this type of announcement on CP24 and having questions by residents and people calling me, understanding what does this all mean, what is the process, and so on. So almost like a cheat sheet, some form of understanding that over the next couple of months that there might be other timely decisions that you make. But I would request that there be some form of briefing document or Q's and A's that gets sent to councillors, very quickly right after, to sort of give us that background and context so we can speak to this point, because essentially it leaves me in the dark, and it just basically, it's frustrating from my point, but understanding that, I guess that you at the time thought it was a good decision, but I would just like to get that heads up.
So, Councillor Medeiros, and part of the worry is literally families were in tears that they were going to be charged penalties, and they wouldn't be able to afford to put food on their table for their family. I would note that I understand that instructions were sent out with Q&A, and it's now on the city website. It's not automatic. You actually have to notify the city, but I'll just verify. I'm not sure if the clerk or communications, but I was told it was on the city website, Q&A and how to apply. Can we just verify that? Can the CEO or the clerk verify that?
Through the mayor, it's Martin Finnegan from Revenue. We do have FAQs on the portal through social media as well, and we're continuing to add to them as we get different questions from residents through email, through phone, through councillors as well.
So through the mayor, thank you, Martin. So the process would be we essentially would direct residents to notify the city of their intention to defer paying taxes.
Through the mayor, that's correct, Councillor Medeiros. It's
Okay.
for those that are on pre-authorized payment plans, they will have to notify the city in writing that they want to cancel those plans. Otherwise, we will continue to collect taxes as we always do for those customers. That for those who have had post-dated checks, there's only one installment left. We'd ask those residents to call in to cancel that post-dated check if they don't want it to be cashed. Part of the recommendations here today are to waive any charges for those check pull requests as well. Folks who just typically come in and pay at City Hall or through the bank for that April 22nd installment, that there's no real action anybody has to take in regards to canceling that. The amounts will stay on their account as arrears. There won't be any penalty being charged until after the August 19th waiver period ends, at which point in time the penalty and interest will accrue again on any arrears on the account. So we're encouraging the residents who can make payments to continue to make the payments that they normally do. The city still needs to operate, and we still have to, we still are hoping that our cash flow is enough so that we can do that. So people don't have to defer their taxes. We're not waiving any due dates. They're not changing any due dates. We're simply stalling any penalty and interest on any future due payments, and also for all past taxes due. So the waiver period is it's not for specific folks. It's there for anybody who needs to take advantage of it, but also for anybody who's able to pay or whose situation is different than others and wants to continue to make their payments, because at some point in time there'll be a catch-up period where the taxes will have to be paid because they are not being canceled. They're being waived, or they're being deferred.
And so just to clarify, what that means is that anyone who is facing financial hardship, they can stop paying their, they can defer their payment for up to 5 months. And if someone doesn't have any financial hardship and just wants it to continue to come off their automatic payment, then they're welcome to continue to pay their taxes.
Yeah, and I guess through the mayor, again to staff, so regarding, Martin, thank you for explaining this, but I think there's a nuance here, because I think as much as we try to communicate it, and I guess my next question would be the communication, I would imagine that this is being shared multilingually, as we have a large large non-English speaking population here in Brampton. So I would assume that this would also go out. But I guess the fear that I have, and I know Councillor Fortini has expressed as such, is that allowing the 5-month grace period, there seems to be an understanding that after the 5 months, so when it gets to that 5-month period, if seeing what happens after, people are still going to have to pay it, and there's going to be a larger sum to pay. Understanding they're putting food on their table, understanding all these stories, but there has to be that clarification, and that has to be that in terms of expectations, that this is not waiving of the 5 months, that this is a deferral for 5 months. But unfortunately, what they're doing is they're adding, I think, to pay back, as Martin just expressed. I think that might be a crunch. So again, it goes back to 3 or 5 months. What's more prudent? I do understand that we're looking at a larger time period, and you talked about that transparency in terms of giving residents that realistic view. But at the same time, as you allow 5 months to proceed, when it gets time to pay the piper, they're going to have to still pay, and it's going to be a larger sum to pay. So I'm not sure how prudent that is. Again, I respect the decision, but that's just something that I think that we have to be concerned about. And just lastly, again, to communication, if you can just comment on how we're getting this out through multilingual channels. Thank you.
So through the mayor, there's been talk, Councillor Medeiros, there's been communications between ourselves and Jason Tamming's team, where We are getting that message out as well to all ethnic media. It's in the works as we speak. So that is going to happen. And as we expand our FAQs, depending upon the questions we get over the next week or so, we'll share those with communications as well to ensure that they can interpret those messages for those folks that English isn't the first language. So we'll continue to work on that. In regards to the other question, yes, that's an issue which we're already seeing when we get phone calls now. There's a bit of a confusion, some folks thinking that the deferral means a cancellation, and we're being very clear that it does not mean a cancellation. So there's potentially 2 installment payments that will have to be made up. Some folks may have already paid the March installment because the action we're taking here is retroactive. Don't know exactly how many did at this point, but there may be some that have to pay 1 installment. There may be some that have to pay 2 installments. Come
well,
August
I just find, yeah.
And I would add to that. I would add to that I have gone on Facebook and cultural media. I've done about 18 interviews this week, and I've told everyone that it is a deferral, not a waiver. I know Mayor Tory and Mayor Crombie had the same question, and we've all been pretty consistent that it is a deferral, not a waiver. Just yesterday, I was correcting a few people on Facebook, so I think the word is starting to get out. But that's any additional communication tools that comms can provide would be helpful.
Yeah, and again, I think that, my concern again, if they can't put food on their table after 3 months, they're not going to put food on their table after 5. So it's just, again, the length of time, at least the 3 months gives them a little bit that discipline that they eventually do have to pay, and they have to meet their obligations. If we leave it to 5 months, we're just having them pile debt. But I guess we'll wait and see. I could be wrong, and thank you, staff and everyone involved.
Well, on that front, Councilor Medeiros, I would say it may need to be longer than 5 months. I don't want to sugarcoat things for the public. I want to be frank. This is going to hurt. This is going to be difficult financial times, and I don't want the city to be a barrier for people, for families to be able to put food on the table. Businesses are going to go under right now. I'm hearing every day, I got emails from small businesses who are saying they're not going to be able to pay their rent, let alone pay taxes to the city. On the call with senior levels of government, they're looking at measures that, whether it's forcing the banks to have extended deferral on mortgage payments, everything is on the table right now to get through this period. This only happens once every 100 years. And I think during this period, we're going to have to show compassion. And, we're going to have this conversation again in 5 months if we're not through it. And so I just want council to be prepared. I want you to have both eyes open. This is not going to be easy. This is going to be hard. And there's going to be some instances where government's going to be expected to show more compassion. I see we have Councillor Bowman on the list, and then Councillor Fertini. Councillor Bowman.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor. I'm coming through okay?
Yes.
Okay, I just wondered, Martin from Finance made a good point, and I don't want that to escape. He mentioned about past due tax bills. So the question is, for someone who is, I don't know, maybe 6 months to a year behind on their tax payments, are we saying that the interest that's been accumulated up to this point on those past due taxes is now null and void, or are we saying that is still due but 5 months later?
So through the mayor to Councillor Bowman, any past due interest that's already been charged remains on the account. As well, yes, nothing further will be added to the amounts owing until the waiver period is over on August the 19th. So they will still have to pay those prior due taxes. But at this time, any interest on those prior due taxes, even though they occurred before this initiative, will remain owing on the account.
Okay, I just want that to be made clear as well, because I don't want to, in 6 months or a year when this is all over, for people who had been in arrears to come forward and say, well, you guys eliminated all the tax. So if we can put that out somehow in a memo as well, when we reaffirm that this is a deferral of taxes payable. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
That'll be a good one. We'll add to the FAQs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Fertini, and then we have Councillor Paleshi and Councillor Williams.
Sorry, I guess I'm still on the board. I took my name off. I was going to ask the same questions, Mr. Mayor, that Councillor Bowman asked for rears, and so he asked my question already.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fertini. Councillor Williams. Actually, no, sorry. Was that Councillor Paleshi there too?
Yep, I'm up.
So Councillor Paleshi and then Councillor Williams.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I guess we're going into a broader conversation around the grand scheme of things, and I know that the deferral is a deferral of taxes, and come 5 months, where I don't even believe that we'll be out of this, we'll probably be looking at a extension of the deferral. I think the discussion here really needs to be at the City of Brampton, and I know it doesn't relate too much to this, but it does, is the fact that there's a lot of people out there that believe the only way around this is a complete lockdown. And I don't know, and that's going to hurt in the short time for a lot of businesses. And I've spoken to a number of businesses as well as you have, Mayor Brown, and they're all kind of getting the same sense. If we don't completely lock down this country, we're not going to be out of it in 5 months, 8 months, 12 months. So I don't know what kind of advocacy that that needs to be taking place, but I think that's a discussion that we need to have now. I think it's a discussion that we need to have tomorrow at the region, and we need to be asking our upper levels of government to make those decisions.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Paleshi, I think that's a broader conversation we're going to be having with upper levels of government and the region as well. And I do think it's a conversation worth having. But for this discussion, let's stick to the tax aspect. But I agree with your sentiments there. Any additional questions, Councillor Paleshi?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I'm just wondering, this also applies to businesses as well, is that correct? Businesses will have the ability to defer.
I'll let Mr. Finnegan speak to this, but I would say part of the challenge is your property tax bill is, part of it goes to the region, part of it goes to education taxes. I think the region is going to do the same thing, hopefully very soon. I've spoken to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and the Minister of Finance about waiving the education portion. They said that it's on the table and they're considering it right now. So I'm optimistic they're going to do the same thing. And obviously, the different portions of the tax bill affect businesses differently. But why don't we have our representative from Finance speak to this?
So through the Mayor to Councillor Williams, it involves all properties. There's no differentiation whether it's residential or business. The same offer is on the table for anyone who wants to defer payments, future payments, to August 19th. They will not be penalized for doing that. But again, we encourage anyone who can continue to pay the taxes, because we are not changing due dates. You can still, businesses and residents can still pay their taxes as they normally have. All the payment options are still open, except obviously at a city facility. If you made payments at City Hall or possibly another city facility, that's not on the table anymore, but you can still do it online. You can still do it through telephone banking. Go to certain financial institutions are still open. So there's a number of methods. You can put it in the mail, but we are still process them. We're still uploading payments we receive from the bank on a daily basis into the tax accounts. So updating it people as much as we possibly can. Folks can see their tax account situation online if they're worried about it or just want to make sure that their payments did get processed and they have credit for them. They can still do that. So for residential and business, the offer is there until August 19th.
Okay, thank you. So for those who would normally pay cash at City Hall, is the opportunity for them to do email money transfers available?
You can do email money transfer through the bank, yes. You can pay cash at the banks as well. So that option is still there.
That's there. So in the essence of being compassionate, I'm just also have been asked the question of some business about vendors and suppliers who receive payments from the city. I don't know if it's possible to kind of look at this as well. And having some of those vendors, instead of waiting 30 days, to have an accelerated payment period, so that they're able to continue to, do their business, have things run, even pay their taxes and so on and so forth.
Well, through the chair, I did hear a bit about that, but I'll let the treasurer.
Hi, Dave Sutton here. I believe that's actually a subject of a communication from the Brampton Board of Trade that's on the agenda as well. So maybe we can talk about it there, but it's a separate issue from this property tax issue.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Dillon.
Sorry, can you hear me, Mayor Brown?
Yes.
So my question is through you, Mr. Mayor, to finance. I'm just trying to map out, and a number of different residents have asked me about property taxes and what happens if it's deferred. Can you map out what will happen if we see this going longer than expected? I understand the mayor said he wants to be very upfront with our residents. And so if this extends longer than 5 months, what will happen with the city's finances and our budget? And second question is, under these emergency situations, what support will the province have in place, speaking specifically to property tax? Because the province, I'm just finishing up, Mr. Mayor. We only have two sources of revenue, whether we get downloads or we get the actual property tax payments. So it's a concern that our residents have.
So, Councillor Dillon, in fairness to the finance staff, I think it's difficult to get into hypotheticals in terms of what the provincial or federal governments would do. On the call with the Deputy Prime Minister, she has said they are going to help municipalities get through this, because obviously they can take on debt and run deficits in a different manner that municipalities can. The Provincial Minister of Finance, Rod Phillips, I was speaking to, he said, keep track of all your expenses. There's going to be a reconciliation. Now, these are nice words. They're encouraging words from the province and federal government, but until we see it, it doesn't count. And so right now we're being given promises that they're going to help us through this, but promises until we see a check at the City of Brampton is just a promise.
Well, no, I understand that, Mr. Mayor, but I would be concerned if there wasn't a plan in place. You see different natural disasters across the world, for example. You might see a hurricane somewhere. You might see an earthquake where it devastates a local economy. I understand this might be on a grander scale, but I'm just asking the city, there must be some hard points, hard dates that we're looking at. If we don't have this much property tax within our accounts, when will happen? So I'm just trying to get I'm not trying to doomsday scenario per se, but I'm just trying to gauge, per this year, what's going to happen if we don't collect a certain amount of tax.
Okay, David, if you want to answer that.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try to start and then perhaps pass it over to the Treasurer as well. As noted in the report, there's $585 million that has been billed for 2020 so far. $364 million has been collected to date. Future interim payments total $211 million. So that's the amount that has not been collected yet for 2020. The intention is certainly, and along with other municipalities that are offering the same type of deferral and the same type of penalty and interest waivers across Ontario, is waiving the penalty and interest. And for Brampton, that adds up to about $1 million a month in terms of lost revenue from waiving penalties and interest. The intent is certainly still to recoup the balance of the $211 million by the end of the year. Certainly things may change throughout that process, but that's the intent, and as well as other municipalities that are doing the same thing. And I think that was noted by some councillor comments as well. And so with that, I'll pass it to the treasurer if there's anything additional.
Yeah, thank you, David. Maybe just to add to that, so our financial planning team is actually working with the operating departments to put together the financial model, obviously, to play out various scenarios. We'll be sharing that with the CAO and the emergency measures team in terms of what does the city look like from a financial picture under various scenarios. So obviously cash flow, we don't know how many people will take up the option to defer taxes, so we're monitoring those actuals as they come in and then updating our financial models as the information changes and as decisions are being made. But that model will help inform future decisions that may need to be made from an operational perspective for the city.
If I may
so, and I appreciate that to Dave, both Daves in. So I understand that we're going to monitor as the situation evolves, and so I guess like the rest of the council will be looking forward to seeing what you guys bring back. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Singh, we have you next.
Yeah, I guess some of the points I had have been touched on, because with this deferral and given the fact that the user fees are going to be significantly down, given the closing of our recreation center, I am concerned about the cash flow. So I guess I'll wait for you to prepare that model. Do we have a timeline when we'll be coming back with such a model?
Through the chair, we don't have a timeline. Obviously things are changing day to day, and we're just trying to get all the initial inputs into that model. We're looking at it both from not only a cash flow standpoint, but also from a profit and loss standpoint. So if there's any deficits that are, non-recoupable, if, as you mentioned, user fees, for instance, if we're providing free transit, those revenues are effectively lost. There's no expectation to receive those by the end of the year, which is different than a scenario playing out with the deferral of property taxes, where our anticipation or expectation is that those would be paid by the end of the year. So there's two angles that we're looking at that from.
And Councillor Singh, I would say on that front, when the dust settles a little bit, we'll have a better idea of what this means. Yesterday, Rod Phillips was talking about reconciliation for transit costs that we're losing right now. How much of that how much they're going to cover, I don't know. I'd also note there's expenses that the city would normally accrue every week that we're not going to be accruing during this pandemic. And so I think if we give David some time, he'll be able to look at all this and have a staff report for us on it. And if this goes past Canada Day, we're not going to have a giant concert at Shinkuzi Park, which is an expensive event that we put on. That's just one example. We're not going to be hiring summer students to be giving swim lessons and summer camps if this goes on as long as we think it's going to. And so there are a lot of changing dynamics right now. But I think David has heard from council that they like an estimate of a financial picture that we can provide in a staff report. Councillor Singh, do you have any additional questions before I go to the next speaker?
No, that's it.
Okay, Councillor Fortini.
Just a clarification to say, you said we're losing about $1 million a month, so that's for 5 months would be $5 million.
That's for late fees and penalties.
Yeah,
correct.
So what was the rationale for staff to do 5 months when Caledon's done 2 months and other cities have done 3? And then we can always add another 2 months or 3 months. Why all of a sudden 5? One shot.
So
we're being more honest with the public, and I think you're going to see those cities extend theirs.
Well, I'm asking staff why. How did they come up with 5 months?
So through the chair. So there were many conversations going on with the local municipalities, area municipalities, as well. I was on a phone call with the FCM, with municipalities right across Canada, and even we do know that some have done 30, 60, 90-day deferral periods for penalties and interest. However, the thought or the conversation really there was most people expect that this is going to go on longer, that they'll have to revisit those dates and probably push those dates out. We wanted to be upfront with our residents. We understand the pressure and the pain that they'll be going through over the. We're hoping it's shorter than longer, but we don't know. Just from a communication standpoint, it did make it somewhat easier because August 19th would have been the first installment date for final billing for the non-residential taxpayers. So that period represented the period from March 18th to August 19th. It's a date that many people would have been familiar with already. It would have been the second billing date for residential, for installments.
My second question is, so I had that conversation with Councilor Maderos because I worry 5 months on the road, you know what's going to happen? They're going to make, between other payments, they're going to put a little bit in every payment to keep ends meet and food on the table. Are we going to be prepared after to start doing a plan to make them pay so much a month to do a catch-up? Because I have a feeling we're going to have a big percentage, and we already get complaints now that they're behind before this happened. And we talked to you many times, Martin, to help out. He did a great job. So we have a plan after. What are we going to do with these residents who cannot pay these 5 months, and then they're going to add another 5, so they got 6 months, one after every month to pay all at once?
Through the chair. So the difference that people make up would not necessarily change between the March and the August period. It would still amount to the same amount. We do propose, or it's not necessarily a proposal, but we do comment, this will come at a separate time, but we would be recommending that the first installment for the final billing actually occur in September for both residential and non-residential. That way, the August date would become effectively the makeup date. You wouldn't have to make a double payment for any prior taxes in arrears. It would become a single payment for those taxes in arrears, and then the September date would be September, October, and November would be the installment dates for those next 3 months.
Okay, I think what I'm trying to say is, if I'm behind 5 months on the road, and I can't pay now and I can't pay later, are you going to be prepared to make me a plan for me to pay so much a month on my arrears? Because if I can't pay now, I won't be able to pay in 5 months on the road. So we have to come up with a plan for these people to help them out.
So through the mayor, Councillor Fortini, there is the opportunity for folks to make a payment plan when they are at the point of registration of taxes. But that said, we can make a payment plan with anyone.
Okay.
So the difference is the payment plan still continues to accrue penalty interest throughout the period of time.
Right.
So, but we can do that. We're prepared to do that. So we would offer that as people come to us and let us know their situation. We have models that we use. So the only thing I would say is the maximum period is 2 years. That's through a council endorsed policy. So we do a maximum of a 2-year payment arrangement with folks who are interested in that. And that within that 2 years, we would encompass, to the best of our ability, any future billings that would accrue on that account, plus whatever's in the past, to try to give them a monthly payment if that's what they wanted, bi-weekly payment, however they want to work it for that up to 2-year period to clear the taxes.
Yeah, and I know, and thank you. And Councillor Bowman raised my question the same, because I'm worried if people are already behind until before this happened, we're just putting them more in a hole. So 2 years, will be probably 3 years or 4 years behind, and then it comes to a point where it's going to be crazy. The other question is, that $1 million we lose, is that considered right across the corporation, or just the percentage we had in the past that people have late penalty and interest?
So we based it on last year's, we charged about $12 million, about $12.4 million penalty and interest charges. So we figured it's about $1 million a month, and it's different obviously when we have months where there's a due date, because the penalty's charged if you miss an installment. So you miss that April 22nd installment, you pay the 1.25% penalty. And then the first of every month, whatever taxes are in arrears, also 1.25%. So yeah, it's it kind of averages out to about $1 million, but it can be, we'll see it around 800,000 in months where there's not an installment date, and maybe 1.2, 1.3 million when there is an installment date.
I'm glad that the mayor's doing this, and all of us, we're trying to help out, but I think it would have been better if we did case by case, because a lot of people, where we're going to put them in. So it's like the mortgages. It's saying they're waiving mortgages. If you got money in the bank, they're not going to waive it. It's only the people, you need a letter from work, you're not laid off, and then they might take it. We should have done a case by case to help out whoever's in need.
Well, through the mayor.
Anyway, that was my thought, and thank you for all the work.
Thank you.
If I may.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bertini. Our next question is Councillor Paleshi for a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to maybe piggyback off of the other item that Councillor Medeiros was talking about. When you go on the City of Brampton website and you see the big red banner that tap here for COVID-19 update, you tap there and you go into a number of the most recent updates, and this tax deferral being one of those updates. But what you don't see until you scroll all the way down to the bottom is read the latest update in French, Punjabi, Urdu, Gujarati, Hindi, and so on. I was wondering if we could get that highlighted and put somewhere up at the top, maybe before recent updates. And I'm only bringing this up because it does have to do with the update that we're providing today.
Yeah, great idea, Councillor Paleshi.
The short answer is yes.
So through the chair, Jason Tamming is here, and he's taking that back to the communications group. So we'll get that taken care of.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Councillor Santos.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I was just taking myself off mute through you, Mr. Chair, to probably staff. As we're looking at the deferral of tax payments, I'm making an assumption that we're also doing some scenario planning with respect to the budget.
Through the chair, so Councillor Santos, this is where I was mentioning before, we are doing the financial modeling around how it's impacting the budget from where we would stand at year end, as well as the cash flow aspect of it.
Great. So as we're looking at the big picture with respect to the deferral of taxes, given everything has been shut down essentially at the city, I imagine that there may be also some cost savings and reduction in operating costs as well.
Through the chair, there could likely be, I believe there are already some, and those would be fed into the model along with any revenues loss or any other scenarios that are being played out based on decisions that are being made.
Okay, so I'm going, I do support the deferral for 5 months. I think that given everything that has happened, to be perfectly honest, in weeks leading up to it, the country, province, and region before we started shutting everything down, were a little bit underestimating the impact of what COVID-19 would have in our communities. And so I think now is the time for us to take a precautionary approach and probably plan for what may be the worst case scenario for us. So deferring the property taxes for 5 months, I have no issue with. I think it is important for us to be honest with the public, and also at the same time, I think that the public will be honest with us. I think that they know that we are all in this together in Brampton, and if people can afford to pay their property taxes, they will pay their property taxes on time. And for those people who really need the support to defer property taxes to a later date, they will do the same. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Santos. Councillor Vicente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Santos, for bringing up how this may impact the budget. I think that that's important information for members of council to see going forward. I wanted to just ask a question on behalf of residents who have been asking us. In situations, obviously this motion will help everyone to manage their cash flow better. For individuals who are paying their property taxes through their mortgage payments, what options do they have if they would like to take advantage of this flexibility? What can they do with their banks to defer their payments, if that is even possible?
So through the mayor, Councillor Vicente, that one, we're expecting financial institutions to continue to make payments as previously arranged. In those cases, the city is really not a party to the agreement between the financial institution and the mortgager. So that the arrangement is between those two parties. For a resident who's paying their taxes through their mortgage, they couldn't come to us directly to say, we now want to pay through the city directly, and we want to do an installment so we can defer. We don't have the authority to allow that to happen. They will need to go to their financial institution. They will have to revisit their agreement, in effect, to say, we want to now pay our own taxes. The financial institution would have to agree to release them from their agreement, and it, depending on the circumstance, can be different for everyone. In the normal course of action, if the mortgage company agrees with that, they would send notification to the city that this resident is no longer a client, and they can pay their taxes in their normal way. When we get that kind of communication from the FI, then we would go in and we'd cancel that arrangement. And once that happens, then that resident would have the same ability to defer as those who aren't in an agreement with their financial institution.
Okay, thank you. So can we, as part of our communication with residents pertaining to this item, can we provide that kind of information to residents so that they understand that they have that option, that they can communicate with their bank and make alternative arrangements, which could include them exiting from the arrangement where the bank is paying the taxes for them? Is that possible?
Through the mayor, it is. I appreciate it because we're looking at things moving very fast. So as questions like this come up, we're constantly adding to the FAQs that are available through the portal. The communications team is very quick to respond when we provide new questions such as this one, which we'll be acting on today, to make sure that we have direction for people. To see it on the portal without having to call in saves time for everybody. But definitely, any other questions that you may receive over the course of the next week and coming weeks from residents that maybe we don't have on the portal, we'd appreciate a heads up from any counselor for us to make sure we continue to add to the list and try to make it as complete as possible for any possible question that's being asked.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vicente, any other questions?
No, thank you.
And I would note, right now this motion is being moved by Councillor Singh and Santos. Since Councillor Vicente asked, Councillor Santos, would you mind if he could be the seconder? He is the vice chair of the Budget Committee.
No problem.
Okay, I didn't think it would be. Councillor Williams is next.
Through the mayor to staff, I think Councillor Fotini makes a good point around making sure that people have the opportunity to use a payment plan if possible. And you know, I think the message is taxes still have to be paid, whether there's a deferral or not. So I'm wondering if in the communications or if there needs to be an amendment to the motion to have a payment plan available, a number to call, or a place where people can ask and request that starting from now. So whether they want to change their payment from every 3 months or every 2 weeks or whatever, we can have somebody work with them to work that out, just to make it a little bit easier for them during this period.
So Councillor Williams, that is available currently, so it wouldn't need to be part of the motion.
So having that highlighted, I guess, in the FAQs or on the in the correspondence to the community, and stressing that point, I think it's important that people have the option. If you, instead of a deferral, how about we work on a payment plan during this time, whether it's lesser payments over a period of time or whatever may have you. You guys will be able to figure that out. You're the experts, but you know, making sure that that opportunity is out there and it's at the forefront.
Through the chair, I should just point out that through this period, I mean, we can obviously have the conversation with the resident or business about that, but during this 5-month window, they can actually make a payment at any point in time. So they can actually create their own payment plan through this time, pay through their regular electronic banking or telephone banking or you know, check in the mail for any amount. It doesn't have to be the full amount. We'll process that on their account.
So having that message out there and available, you know, it's key, because I think the messaging and the people are getting it's about the deferral rather than how can we make it, how can you get your payments paid during this period, and how can we help you make it easier rather than we're deferring, right?
Yeah, so through the chair to Councillor Williams, that is out there, that we are accepting payments, and we encourage payments, and they don't have to pay the whole amount. They can pay what they can afford to pay as many times as they like. Absolutely. Up until the 19th. So that's out there right now. I think the payment arrangements that might be required would be after the waiver period is over, and then final billing is implemented. Then we might see a situation where, like Councillor Fortini was suggesting, people might be looking for a little bit.
So in preparation for that period, maybe we can get comms to do some graphics to let people know what services are available in the city for payments. Maybe the comms group can work on some graphics that can be shared to let residents know of how they can sign up for a different payment plan at their own choosing.
That's right. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Williams. And we have Councillor Fortini again.
Last time. I just want to go back on the property tax. I know some residents came to me in the past that were behind. And they wanted to do a plan. We said to them, you have to pay a certain amount now, and then the rest you go on a plan. So that's why I'm trying to say, I hope we have a plan for these people. Because I know if I'm behind 3 years and I get a letter, and I come and say, I can only afford $4,000, I can't afford $18,000, they would say, you have to pay minimum $12,000, then the rest we can make a plan. That's what I'm worried about.
Okay, so, yeah, sorry, through the mayor. I think I understand what that is. In a lot of cases, when a resident might be getting close to being into the third year of arrears, that now they're moving into collection phase. So when there's a lump sum amount that's being requested from staff, it's to make sure that you're now not going to be in that registration phase. Right. And that means now we can have a payment arrangement on the balance. Okay. That's what that's.
Okay, one more question. I think this is going to be for the mayor or staff. I don't know. When are we having our next council meeting?
So if we have staff reports to present by Wednesday, we'll call the next council meeting for Wednesday.
Okay, next Wednesday. So since we're looking at the budget, like Councilor Santos said, and we have to save because of all this, we're losing money here on the taxes. Can we get a list of where we could save something like the newsletters? Why, we're going to be sending newsletters out. That's 359,000. We got to start cutting down on places to make up the difference. So we could get a list of what we could actually see, or we could save, and before we start jumping the gun.
If I may, I'll start and perhaps hand it over to the treasurer as well. I just want to say, from an order of magnitude perspective on the tax collection side, if people are paying through their mortgages and they call to get their mortgage deferred, we anticipate we will still get paid through the financial institution, as that as an agreement between the resident and the mortgage institution. So we'll have a better idea in terms of what the uptake is after 30 days, 45 days, 60 days. And so we anticipate a bulk of that revenue still coming forward in terms of mitigating and understanding what the order of magnitude is moving forward. The same on the expense side of the balance sheet. So both the revenues and expenses, we basically have, for intents and purposes, a hiring freeze in place, except for exceptional operational needs and requirements. So there's plenty of vacancies that have been put on hold, the hiring that's been put on hold. The bulk of our expenses relate to our staffing, and as well as our operational expenses have all really slowed down as well. And that's the financial modeling that the treasurer will be coming forward with. It may be premature at this point in the next week or two to start requesting council to pass resolutions on dialing out up or down on the numbers. I think we're doing that naturally through attrition right now to keep the costs down with respect to our appropriate revenue levels. And with that, I think there was a motion passed by council with respect to the meeting schedules, and council waived today's meeting and the regular meeting, but the special meeting was called in its place. So if we have a regularly scheduled meetings that were approved by council, I think my sense is it would have to be canceled, but I'll look to the clerk to respond to that. So between the meeting schedules and the financial, I'll look to the treasurer and clerk.
Okay, thank you. So going back to the taxes, so you're saying if my mortgage, my property tax paid through the mortgage, if my mortgage bounced, the bank still sends the property tax? Is that what you were saying, David? Oh, yeah.
Through the mayor. So Councillor Fortini, they're expected to. They don't always do. So they may not. Certain financial institutions make good regardless of whether they they have the funds in the account, they'll charge their customer if they have to make the payment and it's not in their account. But it's different for everyone. We find the majority of the financial institution payments that we get are paid not always 100%, but close to 100%.
Yeah, and I get that point. If you have an overdraft and all that, sure they'll pay. You know? So, okay, yeah, yes, the council. And that's a good point, David. The only reason I'm asking, like, we got the newsletters going out and stuff. So anything we could do, let's see what we could stop. Because I'm sure the residents don't want to sit there and read a newsletter about widened driveways and grass and sheds when we have all this going on now. Thank you. Okay,
seeing no other speakers, we have the motion on the floor, moved by Councillor Singh, seconded by Councillor Vicente. Can I get the clerk to do the vote?
Councillor Santos, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Vicente?
Yes.
Councillor Willens?
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi? Councillor Paleshi? Councillor Paleshi? I'll come back to you. Councillor Bowman?
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros?
Yes.
Councillor Williams? Votes yes. Councillor Fortini? Votes yes. Councillor Singh?
Yes.
Councillor Dillon?
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi? Councillor Paleshi? Mayor Brown?
Yes.
So, Mr. Mayor, there are 10 votes in favor and one. If Councillor Paleshi is present and does not vote, his vote will be shown in the negative unless he's absent.
Okay. Okay.
So the motion carries.
Next up is our staff report on enforcement of social distancing requirements. We're not asking for council to make a decision on this today. I just wanted people to have some awareness that other cities are looking at fines for people that do not embrace physical distance measures, and how social distancing is so key to this pandemic. And we've asked staff to look at the tools we have. As the weather gets better, people are going to have backyard parties. Whether a fine should be imposed if someone has too many people in their backyard. So these are this is something we're going to have to weigh. The mayor of Vancouver has already introduced these measures in Vancouver because they had they have warmer weather there right now, and they had a lot of people out on the weekend. Is there any councillors that want to comment on this staff report?
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Dillon, I believe, wished to comment.
Okay, I don't see him on the list. But Councillor Dillon?
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I had put myself on the list just a little bit earlier. I just had some questions in regards to some of the communications in terms of our communication plan. In terms of getting the message out to a lot of the community, and so everybody doesn't have access to social media. There's many residents, vulnerable people in our society, whether it's disabled or whether it's seniors or whoever it may be, people of ethnic background who don't necessarily tune into the same channels that people in the political bubble do.
Sorry, Councillor Dillon, we have a point of order from Councillor Vicente.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just was pointing out here, I see a message from Councillor Paleshi that he's having some technical difficulties when he tried to vote on the last item. Is there some way that we could call the vote one more time?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Paleshi did text me that saying he had technical difficulties, and he indicated his vote was yes. So under these circumstances, he will be marked as yes, and that last vote on report 3.3 carries unanimously 11-0.
Okay. Thank you, Clerk. Councillor Dillon, if you want to proceed.
Yeah, so as I was saying, I just want to get an idea of what our communication plan is. As members of our community who are not able to tune into the same channels that we in the political bubble, or people who are in tune, who are in tune with what's going on. Some people don't have that luxury, that opportunity, and so I'm just asking staff what we're doing. What's our exact outreach plan? Do we have, what's going on with our newsletters? Do we have a plan in place for that? Do we have signs that are on the roads? The town hall that we have. There's some people that had mentioned that, they were expecting a call, but they had to sign up again. And so I'm just wondering if staff is taking all of these taking all this information in, and if you can tell me what we've done so far.
Okay, so does a member of the communications department want to answer that? I would say the Peel Public Health does a lot of this too, but maybe we can have the CEO designate someone to highlight what the communications measures the city's taken.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. It's Jason, Director of Strategic Communications, and thank you, Councillor Dillon, through the Mayor to you. We're doing a number of different initiatives. I'll just go back and highlight a few things. I know there was a comment about translated material. Every service information update and media release continues to be translated into the top 10 languages per Council's direction last year. And so that's ongoing, and we'll move that piece up on the website, but those are there and are available, usually same day or next day in those to get those translated. With respect to the newsletter, the discussion, we are looking to do a separate COVID-19 update to the public, and I know some councillors had some questions via email about that, and so the update would be that we would produce a document with a message from the Mayor and all of Council, as well as a number of updates on services, tips, where to the tax payments, as well as the website, which is the best place for people to be going for the most up-to-date information, as we can update it in real time. So that is aiming for March 30th. We're going to have a draft for everyone to look at, and so that's only a few days away. So that will be circulating shortly. For the next 2 weeks, there's 2 more town halls that we have booked. So 5:30 p.m. tonight and 5:30 p.m. next week on Wednesdays. At this point, we've moved the RSVP from an email address for the first one to a form on the website. Because of that switch from the first time to the second town hall, we're not keeping folks on the list necessarily, and we'd encourage everyone to RSVP again. I know some people, those that are interested and want to continue receiving the updates, I just encourage them to go to brampton.ca/COVID-19, and there's a form, and they just sign up there, and to do so again for at least the next 2 weeks. After that, communications will be discussing with senior staff and exploring how regularly we continue to do that. I'll just note there's obviously a cost to call the number of people we're calling, and at some point it may be worth going bi-weekly on those updates. Thirdly, with respect to engaging Brampton's diverse communities, we have a number of radio and television spots going out both on the Teletown Hall to advertise that, as well as key COVID-19 messaging. So that includes print, radio, TV, digital tiles in a number of buildings, and working with our local cultural and mainstream media outlets to get the word out. The 3 things we're focusing on in those, one is the tax deferral, and mindful of today's meeting, I haven't moved forward on those because I was waiting for that discussion of council to occur before we move forward with putting those publicly. However, so that will move forward with respect to the tax deferral. Secondly, with.
Jason, the item that we have on the special agenda, I've got to keep clear for consistent for the clerk is communications in regards to social distancing. So we're talking about the enforcement right now. So we can only talk about the staff report.
Sorry, if I can just jump in. I think this, I'm not sure if it's okay with the clerk or you, Mr. Mayor. I think this information that Jason, Mr. Tamming is giving is pretty important right now. I don't know when we'd be able to get it, and I still had one more question. But I think it's pretty relevant to what's going on.
So I'll ask the clerk if he can advise us. Are we allowed to talk to matters that aren't related to the staff report?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, today's special meeting is called in regard to the COVID-19 emergency. And I think the Director of Strategic Communications is trying to relate it back to communications, which does relate to item 3.4 in terms of enforcement provisions related to social distancing. So there is some relationship there, but where all possible, the debate and the questions from members should try to be as brief as possible to proceed with the meeting. Thank you.
So if I can jump in, I had emailed the clerk's office yesterday specifically to ask about the communications plan, and I was told that I could ask it at 3.4. Otherwise, I would have tried to add it as another item on the agenda. But for myself personally, I don't know how other councillors feel. This information is very important that he's giving to us, and so if there's some leeway that could be given, I don't know how much more that Jason has, but I certainly have one more question in relation to this, and I'd like to hear what he has to say.
Since the clerk has advised me he's willing to give leeway, then I will support the clerk's advice. So Jason, please proceed.
All right, just three more items then. As you'll know, Council, the CAO is circulating regularly different updates and social media collateral. So this the graphics around tax payments will be developed today and circulated today or tomorrow. As well as a number of things like the reminder about March break and self-isolating immediately after travel and some of those, so that content's coming directly to your inboxes. Thirdly, with respect to social distancing, two items that the city's undertaking. One would be park signs for all our parks, and signage will be going up in those starting this week. So those signs are getting printed through the sign shop and will be installed later this week. We've also taken the step to rent 20 to 30 mobile road signs that would include information about the city's website. We're pointing people to the website. As I've mentioned, it's the most up-to-date place, and so those road signs would include the city's website, and we may as well include Peel Region Public Health's website as well, as with respect to the coronavirus itself. That's probably the best place for the information, whereas the city's website is the best place where the city's addressing it. But so we'd suggest that. The third thing I'd note, I'm in daily contact with our counterparts in Caledon, Mississauga, and at the region, and they have the region's also going to be partnering and sharing with us some of their public works signs that they have available, and so that's an ongoing conversation, but we should see some of those being updated within our community later this week with messaging as well.
Sorry, and I'll just finish with this, Jason, and through you, Mr. Mayor, is that there's a number of key, I guess, outlets that I go to for daily updates, whether it's on a provincial side or whether it's the federal side of what's going on. For example, TVO gives a good one. Is there something that you're doing right now to give us a daily brief of, for example, if the mayor had a conference call, or if the mayor is speaking to FCM, or if the mayor had a call with the Deputy Prime Minister? Are we getting that communication on a daily basis?
So I'll let the mayor speak to his piece, Councillor, through the mayor. What I would say is the CAO is sending a daily update that includes a number of different updates. It includes an update from Peel Public Health on case numbers and details. It includes internal departmental actions for the day and moving forward. It also includes updates and announcements at the provincial and federal level whether that's new funding available, whether that's actions with regards to shutdowns and essential services. So that information's all in those daily updates that you're receiving, and I think if the mayor has a comment on updates he has.
Yes, and Councillor Dillon, my practice has been to share the regional summary that Nancy sends us. She gives a summary of our daily calls. We have a call with public health, the three mayors, representatives from each hospital, and I share those notes when they're done. We don't have daily meetings, but when we do, I share the summaries. I'd say we usually meet about 5 times a week. And on our WhatsApp group, obviously, for council, I share information as well.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So our next speaker is Councillor Frattini, and then we have Councillor Williams, then Councillor Bowman, and then Councillor Williams.
Sorry,
Councillor Frattini.
Councillor Santos was on the list after Councillor Dillon, before Councillor Frattini.
Okay. Councillor Santos.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Jason. I see you walking away. One of the fastest ways, even faster than social media and television, to get in touch with residents to update them on important issues may actually be through text message. Have you guys looked at possibly using text messaging as a way to very quickly get in touch with residents?
Thank you, Councillor. Through the mayor, that is a tool we could explore. We have not yet, but I know it's a tool out there, and I would suggest that one thing we'd need to do, similar to the form, to respect various legislation and CRTC rules, I would suggest that we'd need to place a form, probably on the website, similar to the Teletown Hall RSVP, where we're asking people to confirm their desire to receive communications from the city on this matter alone, or on this and other matters, and confirm that with their phone number. Then we could look at utilizing a tool like that.
So, Jason, I think if you did that, you wouldn't be able to, people wouldn't know to go there. And so they do allow, I know during elections, we're allowed to send out mass text messages. And so I know some other cities are looking at this. What I'd say is to Councillor Santos, the emergency management team is looking at this, and we'll get back to you on that. I do think it is a great technology.
Thanks so much. And just to note, the region of Peel currently sends out text messages regarding garbage reminders. So even if we can make a recommendation tomorrow or give a heads up to the region at comms, they already have a list of residents throughout the region of Peel who get messages about garbage collection. I'm sure that those same residents would want updates on COVID-19 as well. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Frattini.
Thank you, Jason. This is for more under the bylaws. I think that's what we were talking about. So I know we're going to be doing this. It's a report coming back. Do our bylaws are equipped? Because Vancouver bylaws have different equipment compared to ours. So if they're going to go to these parties or these parks where there's a gathering, what will happen? So
maybe you would ask Commissioner Patari to speak to that.
Thank you. Through the chair. I'm just wondering if Councillor Fortini can repeat the question, because it wasn't clear coming through on Skype.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Through the mayor, we're looking at the bylaws, going around, signing up some work around these house parties or in parks where there's a lot of people. I know Vancouver has done it, and I agree with the mayor, but they're equipped with different equipment. They have different training than ours. So will we be equipped to let them do this? I just worry that something could happen to them when you go in a park and you have 7, 8, 10 people there and bylaw goes over. What can he really do? He's going to start asking for ID, and there's going to be one problem leading to another problem. So that's what I'm asking. Do we have the equipment? Are they trained?
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, I think much of this is articulated in the report for information in front of you. Councillor Fortini raised some excellent points and questions. Those are all things that what we would be considering and actually bringing forward if in fact there is direction from council to proceed with developing a bylaw for approval for us to do that enforcement. Some of the considerations would in fact need to be a requirement for personal protective equipment, protocols in terms of coming up to individuals and asking for their information. But again, I think the focus for us would be to be much more proactive and ensure compliance versus going out and really slapping a number of individuals with a series of fines. If we had to, we would. But the idea is to keep everyone safe and ensure that physical distancing is being adhered to prevent continuous community transition of the disease.
Okay,
But that is something we have flagged in the report that there will be a requirement for that personal protective equipment and some of the costs associated to it. We recognize that we have supplies currently, but we do have other essential services, including transit and fire and others that also are using those. We do have adequate supply right now, but depending on the scope or nature of what we're going to be doing, it could be more.
Okay, thank you. And I understand that, the safety is number one. That's why I'm saying I don't know if they're experienced or they have the manpower or the I don't know how to say, going up to a place and try to stop a party and all. It's the difference when an officer goes there, he's all equipped and everything, than a bylaw just standing with no vest, just a little uniform. So we got to look at the protection of our bylaws. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fortini. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Through the mayor to staff, I've been getting calls from residents who are saying they're either forced to go to work or their place of work is not respecting the social distancing. They're really concerned, and it almost feels like we're not getting the support on the regional side on who to complain to, where to send complaints, how the residents can send complaints about their place of business.
Councillor Williams, Dr. Lawrence Lowe has put it on their Twitter, and he sent an email. Maybe it's only to regional council, but if there are workplaces that aren't enforcing it, you need to call the Peel Police. They've got a number set up, and the Peel Police will be the ones enforcing this provincial order.
Okay, it would be good for us to all have that information, especially as city councillors, if we're not receiving the emails from the region. All of the residents, we receive complaints from residents regardless if we're regional or city, so it would be good to know. But I just wondering if there is somewhere or a way that when you're speaking at the regional council, for them to be able to ensure that residents who are going to places of business, they have a place they can call, an opportunity, just that support that they're looking for, because it's a major concern. And there's also the uncertainty about what is essential, what is not essential. That clarity would be very helpful for our Brampton residents, because they are asking about that, and we need to be able to make sure, like you say, information and being transparent, we need to give that transparency.
So there is a number with the province that people can call to find out whether they're essential or not essential. And so what I'll ask is if David, the CEO's office, can share with council the number for the provincial hotline and the number for the Peel Police contact for those two issues. And they can share that with council later today.
We'll do that. Thank you.
And so another question about the signs. I really appreciate Councillor Dillon mentioning the signs. Do we have those large stand-up signs, or is that just provided by the region? Because I think those signs are really great to have them up for information, especially as now that we just need to get the information out there. Do we have those at the city, and is this something that we now need to look at purchasing more of?
Thank you, through Mayor. We do have 3, I'm being advised, and possibly a few more. And I think we are using at least 1. And so we'll look at better utilization of the other few that remain.
And since we only have 3, do we need to look at getting more? Because I know the region has the signs, but if we are, we're in this together, we should be able to provide our own large signs. I think they're very effective in our areas. Even information about BMO, information about where our shelters are, the food task the social task force, youth task force seniors. So can we get more of those signs?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, the short answer is yes. Communication and messaging is more important now than ever, so we'll take that as a takeaway.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Williams. Next up is Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Mayor. We're talking about item 3.4, right? We're talking about the report that's going to come back on possible fines and
yes.
Okay, because I think we're stretching it a little bit here. Yeah. And I'm all in favor of seeing this report come back. To be brutally honest, sometimes I sit here and my head's about to explode, because if people don't know right now that social distancing is something they should be doing, it's on every TV station, every radio station, everywhere you look, it's there. But we continue to see it where we go out or all drive by and there's people lined up face to face, 2 feet away from each other. So I'm looking forward to having this report come back. The sooner the better. I know Vancouver is very high on doing this as well. You know, this is not, to me, this is not about people not knowing what they're supposed to do. It's about people just not bothering to do what they're supposed to do. And maybe that's the elephant in the room we should all be talking about. I'm just wondering, and I don't know which other councillor had mentioned this before. Joe Patare was talking about the ability to enforce any of this once the report does come back. That's my only concern about enforcement. And I mean, we had an example just 2 days ago, or 3 days ago, I guess, when the Premier announced that all non-essential services were going to be shut down. There was a huge lineup outside the marijuana dispensary in my ward. And I believe it was reported to bylaw. They just went and spoke to the owner. And after that date, there has been proper distancing. I think the owner has ensured proper distancing between anybody lining up there. So, you know, it is possible to do it, but I'm just wondering, will bylaw, is this something that bylaw is going to have the manpower to start enforcing if we do agree to it when it comes back?
Is that a question to Commissioner Patari, or more of a general comment?
I think it's a question. You know, are we going to have the resources and the authority to actually do this? Or are we just, you know, is this just going to be a nice report?
Commissioner Patari?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Patari perhaps can't dial in at the moment, so Director Paul Morrison is here to answer questions.
Okay.
Through you, Mr.
And
Mayor.
I would note, before Paul Morrison speaks, Councillor Bowman, the benefit of us, you know, doing the research now is we'll see in live time how it works in Vancouver, so that will give us some insights into how they struggle with. But Paul Morrison, if you want to proceed.
Yes, sir. Through you, Mr. Mayor, just want to add a couple things. Right now, our staffing model is good. We believe we can deploy and answer some of the, if not as much as possible, all of the needs of the community. We have had great cooperation when we have gone out. When we try to educate, people take that education and they comply almost immediately, if not immediately. So we don't know what the future response is going to be. We have to be cognizant that we're in early days and people are very heightenedly aware to what's going on. It's, if we don't establish ourselves now, it's the weeks to come where people become more complacent about staying, not complacent, but yeah, complacent about staying in, and they start going out and they start getting more so-called cabin fever. They start to try to social interact again. We have to be already proactively doing certain things to lessen that, if not eliminate it. So we are right now prepared to go out and engage the public.
Thanks very much, Paul. And I got to say, you and your team are doing a fantastic job so far in this emergency. So I thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else on the list. So we have item 3.4, moved Councillor Dillon, seconded by Councillor Singh. I'll ask the clerk to take a recorded vote.
Councillor Santos, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Vicente? Councillor Vicente? I'll come back to you. Councillor Willens?
Here, I heard him say yes.
Okay. That was Councillor Willens that said yes, or Councillor Vicente?
Escalante.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Willens?
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi?
Yes.
Councillor Bowman?
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros?
Yes.
Councillor Williams? Votes yes. Councillor Fortini? Votes yes. Councillor Singh?
Yes.
Councillor Dillon?
Yes.
Mayor Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, that motion carries unanimously 11-0.
Thank you to the clerk. Our next item on the agenda is public question period. We have a limit of 15 minutes for all questions and answers. I'll ask the clerk if there are any questions submitted during the course of today's meeting regarding decisions made during the meeting.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, we are on item 4, which is correspondence. There's correspondence from Todd.
Sorry, I apologize. Correspondence by Todd Letts from the Brampton Board of Trade. Do we have any questions on the correspondence? Councillor Vicente.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to move receipts of this correspondence. I've been in conversations with some members of the Brampton Board of Trade and also with our economic development staff. The City of Brampton has an opportunity, as it has already done, to help people with their cash flow by allowing for deferral of property tax payments and a deferral of the late fees that would have happened if someone decides to pay at a later date until August. In the meantime, I think we have another opportunity here as per the request here in the letter. Typically, governments tend to have long timelines when handing receivables, and this creates some challenges for businesses, especially now, given what's going on. If we have an opportunity to improve liquidity, this is another way that we could help the business community that do business with the City of Brampton to improve their liquidity in terms of their accounts by paying our receivables more quickly than what we normally would do. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to finance staff, typically how long does the City of Brampton take when dealing with receivables? How quickly do we tend to turn around payment?
So, Councillor Vicente, before we have David Sutton speak, I would just note we did have a conversation earlier today with Claire Barnett, legal, the CEO, and David's team. And at 2 o'clock today on the call with big businesses, we were going to announce that we're going to be able to make payments within, or best efforts within 14 days. And the reason we'll have to say best efforts is because there may be scenarios where we can't get staff into the building and we have to protect staff if anyone gets sick. But this treasurer has given us permission on 2 o'clock, at the 2 o'clock call, to say that we can achieve this with best of the 14-day goal. And David, if you want to speak to that as well.
Through the chair. So to answer the first question, our cycle is usually around 30 days to get payments to vendors. And as the mayor has mentioned, we will make a best efforts for Brampton-based businesses to have payments made with a goal of 14 days. There are obviously many logistical issues, and obviously we're concerned for the health of our workers, and there are a lot of things that need to be put in place in order for that to happen. But we will make our best efforts to improve the cash flow for those businesses that reside in Brampton.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton, and Mr. Mayor, thank you for providing that information here today.
Councillor Medeiros?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess picking on the correspondence and I guess dealing with the business community, dealing with a couple businesses in my area that contacted me in terms of supports, and I directed them via the, I guess, task force and via the communication from the city. I think what the expectation was from the businesses, understanding that they have to go to other levels of government, I thought, the feedback I got is they expected more support. So more support being more of triaging, I guess, actually doing the communication. Because a lot of these small businesses, we're not dealing with people who have sophisticated operations. Often the time, some of them maybe don't have the best communication skills or understand exactly what they're asking for and what supports are there. So as much as we provide them with a resource list, I'm not sure if economic development staff is equipped or what is the reasonable expectation of the type of service our businesses can expect in terms of actually making the calls to the various levels of government, into the various organizations. With that said, if we don't have that capacity, seeing that Brampton Board of Trade is really triaging specifically with their members and providing a very sort of resourceful list and seeing the good work that they're doing over there, if there's an opportunity to maybe support them more and maybe ensuring that they can work more closely with their members to get them the information, because that's kind of what I'm, and it speaks to the point that we talk about with residents again on the property tax, is we sort of provide them with the information and they get raised expectations that we're actually going to provide the surface and help them navigate through this complicated web of supports that are with the federal, provincial level. So those are just general comments. I don't know if staff or if the task force is considering that. And it's not merely just giving them a resource list and say contact A, B, or C, or having authority to do so. So I don't know who the service provider would be the best to direct these folks, but that's kind of the frustration I'm hearing from the business community.
So I think that's a question to Claire Barnett.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe Claire is on this Skype session call at the moment. So I don't know if there's somebody else that
That's fine. If staff want to get back to sort of just my comments, and I guess they're just kind of the frustrations I've heard, and maybe if Claire can get back to us at a later time, or it gets registered with Chair Dillon and Vice Chair Councillor Vicente, if they can follow up on that.
And to Councillor Medeiros,
Councillor Paleshi here. Sorry to cut everybody off. Claire actually just walked into the room that I'm in. If you'd like her to sit down, and we're going to social distance, so I'm going to walk away and she can sit down.
And I would just note before Claire comes to the microphone, we've actually offered a service that is different than an added service I think a lot of cities don't have. I certainly don't think any Board of Trade has done. We've been doing these sector by sector calls with representatives from the federal and provincial governments. And so Claire had someone from the Ministry of Economic Development of Ontario, a senior bureaucrat, on the call explaining their programs to the logistics sector when we had our logistics call. So we're doing these sector by sector calls. We had a technological glitch on the call yesterday for small businesses, but once we sort that out, we had 320 people call in for a phone call that could handle only 100, so that created problems. But as we go through these smaller groups, the goal is to triage by having the provincial and federal governments, and their representatives may not do that through a non-government body, but they've been very accommodating of doing it through us. I'll let Claire speak to that.
Thank you, Mayor, and to answer what the team is doing right now and the services that are being provided since this happened. My team is divided into two main groups, actually. One is with the Brampton Entrepreneur Center. The team has been on the phone all day since probably last Monday, speaking with small businesses throughout the day and into the evening, really providing hands-on advisory services as they would face-to-face at BEC normally. The other thing that's been happening is we have sector managers who have been on the phone all day with various people from businesses trying to find out what their questions are and addressing them. what we are doing is rolling all of that up into one report where we will have what the themes are and what businesses are asking of us. I have been speaking with the Board of Trade every day, several times a day, on some occasions, about what they are doing and how we can be aligned in our communications. So what they are doing is really issuing a lot of social media and lists. We are not repeating that. We are doing communications that they would not be doing from a different perspective. So we're very, very much aligned in our communications. When a councillor hears of any challenges that businesses are having, I've heard from those councillors and we have been in touch with those businesses. What the mayor is referring to yesterday is we had a call arranged for small businesses to be able to understand what some of their issues and challenges are. And we had over 300 people go on that call and the system just couldn't handle it. The technology was just overwhelmed by it. So what we are doing today is much smaller calls for sizes of businesses and sectors. So we'll continue to do that. But if you are hearing from businesses that have not been in touch with our team, please do have them email the COVID-19 business email address or myself, and I will triage that.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that update, Claire. I think for the business community, there are some huge opportunities right now. If we're talking about the Board of Trade, there's a huge opportunity for them to gain membership by being a leader. I think they've got about 500 members, and we currently have 79,000 businesses in the city. So those businesses that are not members are going to be looking for answers. And if we can get that through Claire and our economic development team, that's great. If we can get it through the economic development task force, that's great. If the Board of Trade can use that as a vehicle to increase their membership, that's wonderful too. I just had a question as well. And I don't know if anybody there can answer it, but I'm wondering if we're talking about all these businesses. We've been in contact with the BIA, and I just don't know if the Board of Trade is holding back any of their membership fees for small businesses that may not be able to pay those as well. I guess that's up to the Board of Trade membership. They can discuss that. But Claire, what are you finding when you're, and thank you for being on the call, what are you finding out there when you're talking to businesses? Is it the small 1 and 2 guy operations that you're dealing with, or is it more medium-sized businesses that are having to lay off all their people and have serious questions about that?
So we're hearing both, depending on the size of business. The smaller businesses are very concerned about liquidity, about having cash flow, and what happens to them when this is all over. Some people are just looking to be able to pay next month's rent. Those are for small businesses, the challenges that they've been sharing with us. For the medium and large employers, it's really about keeping their employees safe, and in some cases, hiring more. So we have heard from several employers in the logistics sector, as well as e-commerce, where they actually are hiring and they need our help to find more people to actually fulfill the orders that they're getting. So we're hearing both.
Okay, and when you're working with the Board of Trade, how are you ensuring that that your same message is getting out between our Entrepreneur Center and the Board of Trade and any other business organization, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, for example, as well as all the announcements that are being made daily by the provincial government? How are you guys ensuring that there's one single message going out?
So Todd, as I mentioned, Todd Letts and I speak often throughout the day to ensure that we know what each other is doing and what information we are sharing. From both perspectives, I think I could say that we are only sharing official, approved government content. So that would be programs that the federal or provincial government are releasing. We are only sharing approved, officially communicated content.
Okay, and that's going out through the Board of Trade or through Brampton or through both?
At times, both. We have a web page, the COVID-19 business web page. We also have content on our economic development website and our social media handle as well. We are working very closely with our comms director at the city, and Todd and I communicate on who will be releasing what.
Okay, and are we working with all of the other, I don't want to say business agencies, but all of the other groups like the Board of Trade, like the Canadian, Indo-Canadian Chamber of Commerce and people like that as well?
We are actually preparing a list now to ensure that we are communicating with all of the types of associations. Our work over the last week was primarily quite local with the Brampton Board of Trade and the BIA. We have opened up conversations with the Black Chamber of Commerce as well. I have been in touch with the federal government from an economic development perspective, as well as the provincial government and other economic development associations across the province. People like myself across the province, we are now sharing information and our experiences to ensure that we are all aligned and we are all supporting each other as well and sharing that information with all sizes of business.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
And that's a good point, Councillor Bowman. I think there's 79,000 businesses in Brampton. There's a lot of these organizations, whether it's the 400 businesses at the Brampton Board of Trade, whether it's the 1,000 in the Indo-Canadian Chamber of Commerce, whether it's groups like New Brampton or the Canadian Black Congress that seems to center their work out of Brampton. I think any of these organizations, the Downtown BIA, any of these organizations that we can work with right now, we want to reach out to help these businesses that may not know where they can get help and help them triage services that are available right now. So thank you for referencing that, Councillor Bowman. I see no other questions here, so I'll go to the clerk. Do we need to have a vote on the correspondence?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes.
Do you want to conduct that vote?
Thank you. Councillor Santos?
Yes.
Councillor Vicente?
Yes.
Councillor Willens?
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi?
Yes.
Councillor Bowman?
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros?
Yes.
Councillor Williams? Votes yes. Councillor Fortini? Votes yes. Councillor Singh?
Yes.
Councillor Dillon?
Yes.
Mayor Brown?
Yes.
That carries unanimously, 11-0.
Okay, that takes us to the next item, which is the public question period. I'll ask the clerk if there are any questions submitted during the course of today's meeting regarding decisions made during the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there were two questions that have come in. The first question is from Christine Massey. It is saying, will council advocate for access to intravenous vitamin C treatments for patients who wish to avoid toxic drugs? Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe the response would be those are matters that are properly handled through the Region of Peel, through the Medical Officer of Health, and receiving proper advice from public health officials. So that's one question. The second question is also from Christine Massey. In a state of emergency, the new normal, why wasn't it declared due to a novel influenza during every flu season, given that this year the Region of Peel reports as of March 21st the following typical influenza numbers: approximately 1,500 cases of lab-confirmed influenza, 347 in the age 65 plus group, 19 outbreaks in institutions involving 4 deaths, unknown total of deaths, compared to previous results, 63 cases of lab-confirmed SARS-CoV-2, 7 in ages 65 plus, no death, and CDC estimates that more influenza-related deaths in the U.S. alone than SARS-CoV-2-related deaths in the entire world. So again, Mr. Mayor, I would probably advise these are appropriate questions that should be addressed to the Region of Peel and the proper public health officials.
Okay, thank you to the clerk. And can you let those two people that asked the questions know that we will forward their questions to Peel Public Health?
Yes.
Our next item is bylaws. We're now at the portion of the meeting dealing with adoption of city bylaws to give effect to council decisions made at this meeting. I have a motion from Councillor Fortini, seconded by Councillor Williams, to approve bylaws 52-2020 and 53-2020. I'll ask the clerk to take the recorded vote.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. And before we take the vote, I just wish to advise that it also includes bylaw 51-2020. That is the procedure bylaw amendment. It was intended to do that amendment after item 3.1, but we can deal with it now. So it's for 3 bylaws. Councillor Santos, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Vicente?
Yes.
Councillor Willens?
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi?
Sure.
Councillor Bowman?
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros?
Yes.
Councillor Williams? Councillor Williams votes yes. Councillor Fortini votes yes. Councillor Singh?
Yes.
Councillor Dillon?
Yes.
Mayor Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, that carries unanimously, 11-0.
Okay, thank you. That takes us to confirming bylaw. We have a motion from Councillor Bowman, seconded by Councillor Medeiros, to approve the confirming bylaw to confirm the proceedings and decisions from this meeting. I'll ask the clerk to take a recorded vote again.
Councillor Santos?
Yes.
Councillor Vicente?
Yes.
Councillor Willens?
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi?
Yes, please.
Councillor Bowman?
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros? Councillor Medeiros?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Councillor Williams? Votes yes. Councillor Fortini? Votes yes. Councillor Singh?
Yes.
Councillor Dillon?
Yes.
Mayor Brown?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously, 11-0.
Okay. Did you add an additional vote for Councillor Paleshi because he said yes, please? I guess that takes us to adjournment. Our last item of business. Council is next scheduled to meet Wednesday, April 15th, 2020, and Wednesday, April 29th, 2020. I have a motion moved by Councillor Vicente, seconded by Councillor Santos, to adjourn today's special meeting. I'll ask the clerk to take the recorded vote.
This is the last recorded vote. Councillor Santos?
Yes.
Councillor Vicente?
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Willens?
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi?
Okay.
Councillor Bowman?
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros?
Yes.
Councillor Williams? Votes yes. Councillor Fortini? Votes yes. Councillor Singh?
Yes.
Councillor Dillon?
Yes.
Mayor Brown?
We.
Mr. Mayor, that carries unanimously, 11-0.
Okay, the meeting is now adjourned. Stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, stay home and practice physical distancing to help flatten the curve of this COVID-19 emergency. Thank you for everyone's patience today as we just completed our first electronic meeting.